Değerli Esport izleyenleri, özel röportajımıza hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Bugün röportajımızın konuğu Turkish Airlines EuroLeague CEO'su Marshal Glickman.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm so happy to have you as an interview today in Soho House for our audience, for Turkish basketball audience. And actually, we can call it as also the audience in Europe. Basketball viewers.
Absolutely.
Yes. How are you? How is life in Istanbul going?
Life in Istanbul is great. We saw yesterday, we had a tour all day and we got to spend time. My wife is a fabulous chef.
Oh, wow.
So she was after the spices. So going into the spice market, incredible, you can imagine.
Of course,
so,
yeah.
But, you know, we bought a nice rug too. So anyway, the beauty, the grandeur of this city, the complexity of this city, the diversity of this city. I've been here maybe 8 or 9 times now. Every time it just blows me away.
Exactly. For us, it has the same effect actually for the Turkish people too.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear this from you because you've been traveling a lot, working in different cities, different countries for basketball. And Istanbul is one of the cities with diversity, as you said. And how did you, when you look back for when it happened, the Final Four here in Istanbul, how was it? What do you think about also the idea of Final Four here in Istanbul?
Well, I wasn't at the Final Four in Istanbul last time, so I can't comment on it. But, you know, listen, I think in the long run, the Final Four ought to be in major capitals. I don't mean capitals, necessarily government capitals. You know what I mean by, you know, the big cities of the world, the big cities of Europe. So, and I love the fact that we're going to Kaunas this year, which is a small city, but it's a basketball city, right? They're just so into basketball there. So I think that's terrific, but I'm excited about future Final Four locations. Istanbul.
Why not?
Obviously on the short list.
Exactly. All right, good to hear this. And first I want to start because I've listened before the interview, I've told you already, I've listened to all the podcasts and interviews. Kyle Hines is my favorite, as I told you. And they've been asking you also a CEO life, right? And I would love to ask you the same question actually. How does it look like from inside actually? Because we're looking from outside. It's always professional. You're always in the meetings. You came to this interview from a meeting. How does it look like being a CEO in a daily life?
One of the better questions I've ever had. I'm not sure I have a perfect answer. It's you have to learn how to manage stress. You have to learn how to multitask and manage kind of complexity. This is a really interesting situation because whether we were selling basketball or whether we were selling widgets, it's really a multinational company, right?
Yes.
We are in, I think right now, 12 different countries. We have multiple languages, multiple cultures, multiple political situations, multiple economic situations. So kind of, you know, and there's politics. There's always politics within the league because different people have different points of view. I don't mean politics in a negative way. I mean in a healthy way. So there's always debates happening about what our format ought to be, what our calendar, should there be FIBA windows, no FIBA windows, what is the business opportunity, should we go to new markets, should we do this, should we do that? So that's something that takes you've got to think fast on your feet. You have to listen. You have to learn to listen to people and process information maybe in a different way. But, you know, for me, it's a thrill and it's exciting and I'm taking it all in and it's so multicultural. And when you think of culture, you know, for me, it's kind of people see things through a different lens. And it doesn't make anybody wrong. It just means they're seeing things through a different lens. And I'm American, right? So I see things through a certain lens. But I've spent a lot of time on this side of the Atlantic as well and have learned to appreciate the multiculturalism. So you asked me a CEO question. On the one hand, it adds complexity. But on the other hand, it adds opportunity, and so it's the opportunity side that I'm embracing.
Yeah, that's great. And since you mentioned you're from America, from the States, and I heard that you also worked for NBA, right?
I worked at the league office in the mid-'80s. I worked at the Trailblazers early in my career in the early '80s, then the league office. Then I returned to the Trailblazers. And shortly after I returned, the team was purchased by Paul Allen, who's the co-founder of he, may rest in peace, he passed, but he was the co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates, so he's a famous guy, and I ended up working for him for 7 years and ultimately became president of the club.
Mm-hmm. And working in NBA. Now, this question is obviously about this comparison that people have been doing all around the world, not only in EuroLeague and also in NBA too. There's been comparison going on between NBA and EuroLeague. NBA is doing this, why EuroLeague is not doing that. EuroLeague is doing this in the game, every game matters, but in NBA, not every game matters. Yesterday, Damian Lillard gave an interview and said, every game has to matter. And so when you hear about these comparisons, how do you react as a CEO?
I don't make those comparisons. I think the NBA is incredible. It's a $10 billion business. I worked at the NBA at a time when there were 55 people in the front office, in the league office in Manhattan. Today, I believe the NBA has something close to 2,000 full-time employees worldwide. We are 100 million sort of business. I mean, it's how do you make comparisons? Now, they're in the entertainment business through the vehicle of basketball, and they're primarily concerned with driving profits. It's business. And they're in one country. Well, okay, they're in Canada with one team. But they are a global business, but their clubs, their ongoing day-to-day operations are all concentrated in one country, one system of federal taxation, So this is a much more complex situation. They play in one league. We play in two leagues. Our teams play in domestic leagues. They have their own politics, their own economic situations, and they play in a European or a pan-European league, which actually isn't all in Europe either. Yeah. Some of it's in Asia, right?
Definitely.
One of the teams here in Maccabi Tel Aviv is actually in Asia. So I just don't see these comparisons. If you want to talk about it from a sports angle, obviously the games are different. Our game here is more coach controlled, I would say. In some ways that's better. The NBA game's more player controlled. It's gotten very offensive oriented. It's very kind of open floor. You know that the floor is actually a little wider.
Exactly.
The three-point line is a little further out, and there's more analytics. And so the math geniuses figured out that you're better off making a lower percentage of three-point shots than a higher percentage of two-point shots. Okay, so we're going to shoot more three-point shots. The game is clearly shifted and changed. Now, at the same time, the talent level that they have, Lillard's a great example, and he's Portland, so exactly. I know Damian a little bit. And so the shots, his physical ability to make shots from distance like that without closing, it's incredible. He's an incredible athlete. So the level of athleticism has sort of forced the game in a different direction, because compared to the athletes, and we had great players in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but the athletic level has clearly increased in the NBA. Our game is more tactical. When I say more coach-centric, I mean more tactical, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. When players are able to execute offense and get an easy shot by being smart about their movement and how they do their cuts, it's really cool. So, yes, we play fewer games than the NBA does, right? At least EuroLeague compared to the NBA. And we are in a situation where every game matters. I'm not a slogan person, but I think it's the best slogan in sports because I think it's authentic. I think it really says something.
Very much.
But as far as comparisons, I don't think it's necessary to make comparisons. I love the NBA. I love EuroLeague. I love the idea that our best players might have the opportunity to play in the NBA, and some of them might rise to become stars in the NBA. I also love the fact that something like 28%, I think it is, of our players are Americans. People forget sometimes these American kids that come over here to play, guys like Tyler Dorsey and Larkin, right? These guys, Mike James, who, by the way, is from Portland, Oregon,
yes, exactly.
and went to my mother's alma mater, Grant High School. So
Really?
my mother went to the same high school. Now my mother's in her 90s, okay? So different eras, right? But
does Mike James knows about that?
no, he doesn't, because I was at one of his games earlier this year, and I tried to find him, and he disappeared into the locker room, so I didn't want to disturb him. So, yeah, there's a bunch of Portland guys over here. It's really funny.
Yes.
I said we should form our own thing, right? We'll do Portland against the world, right? And people go, where's Portland? I don't.
It's a beautiful green.
Yeah, it's a beautiful green. This is true. So anyway, I don't think it's necessary to make these comparisons. I think certainly the number one basketball league in the world is the NBA. And as the CEO of EuroLeague, I'm not afraid to say that. The number two basketball league is EuroLeague. But I don't think it's about ranking. I think it's about what makes us different. So what I try to embrace is what makes us different, which is every game matters, which is the cultural diversity that we have. And just generally, you think about that, we have incredible diversity, which I consider to be an attribute, an asset for us. So I think it's kind of interesting, and we'll see.
And Luka Doncic made the statement, I think, 3 months ago on a press conference.
He sure did.
He said, I watch EuroLeague, I don't watch NBA games.
Okay, well,
how did you feel when you heard about it?
I loved it.
It's amazing.
Loved it.
I loved it too.
He wasn't the only one. There were other NBA players that made similar comments. I think also Giannis and others. So, no, I'm the CEO of EuroLeague. I loved it.
Exactly. But I mean, personally, me as a basketball fan, not a person who works in the basketball media, I would love to see our stars to stay here in EuroLeague, not going to NBA. I would love to watch Luka Doncic here in Real Madrid jersey. That would be amazing. So that's also a different thing, I think.
Well, yeah, but it's not economic reality, and we have to deal with economic reality. When we become a $10 billion business, then maybe some of our players will stay here, okay? I mean, let's be real. What I'd love to see more of, you remember there was something called NBA Europe Live, which I was working with EuroLeague, so I was sort of a part of that back in the day working with Jordy, and we spent 3 years playing games against each other. I think EuroLeague teams won several of those games. Now they're friendlies, so it's a different environment. I'd like to bring that back. But also Commissioner Silver recently made a public comment. They're going to likely launch a mid-season cup competition like we see in our domestic leagues over here. And he talked about bringing teams from other places in the world, EuroLeague teams, Australian teams, who knows what, into their cup. I love that, because now we're talking about a real competition that counts for something. And I would love to see how our better teams would do against their better teams in a competition that really counts for something. I think we'd do really well. I think people would be surprised.
That will be amazing to watch.
Right?
Definitely.
And I think that can happen in the not too distant future, I hope.
Yes. And also, I mean, FIBA, we have to talk about FIBA, because also whenever there's a national team game, for example, Ergin Ataman, the national coach, goes and then says, FIBA and EuroLeague and FIBA. But we've heard that you had a meeting in Munich with FIBA. How did it go? How will be the calendar? There will be any calendar change?
Well, we'll see where we end up. I don't know where the conversations are going to go. I can tell you it was the second discussion that I've been involved in since I've been here with FIBA. This was a much broader group. We had 5 of our clubs with us. FIBA brought a contingent. We spent, I'm going to say, 4 hours together talking about kind of everything. I mean, our attitude is, so we embrace the idea that the best European players should be able to play for their national team. FIBA has qualifying tournaments that happen, that overlap, so it's not a simple thing, because we have so many games and there's only so many days in the calendar. So we're trying to be creative and innovative in discussing different solutions to that. It's not easy, because God gave us only so many days in the year, and the calendar is what the calendar is. Yes. Players need a chance to rest. We want to have more teams. More teams implies more games. We want to play. We want to expand our playoffs. there's other things we need to do as a business to grow our business. FIBA legitimately has to have qualifying tournaments for the major competitions that they play in the off season. Also legitimate. The domestic leagues are a really important part of the mix.
Definitely.
So that also matters. How to make all three of those things work within a finite number of days is difficult, complex, but I'm optimistic. I think there is a way forward. It's going to require all sides to be innovative and change our mentality a little bit. But my view is that our players should have the opportunity to play for their country, and we don't want to prevent that at all. At the same time, we have to run this like a business.
Definitely. And then format related developments to conferences.
Not wild about that idea.
All right.
I'm not, again, there's only so many days in the year, but if we can find a way to keep the round robin format intact, my personal preference, but at the end of the day, the shareholders are the deciders. But I would like to find a way to make it work without changing to conferences.
All right. And Dubai talks. There have been a lot of Dubai talks. Yeah. And what would you like to say about that?
We're still talking, it's a complex deal. You're talking about, establishing a presence in a region of the world where basically basketball doesn't exist, other than there are some academies. So this is a virgin territory for basketball. They have a really nice arena. The people involved in the discussions are really committed, so we love that. But we have to be careful because if we bring Dubai into the mix, probably there's some other European market that isn't in the mix, because there's only so many days, which means so many games and so many teams. So do we prioritize Dubai over Paris, London? Maybe, maybe not. So those are interesting discussions, raise a lot of issues, but we see opportunity, right? This is a region of the world. There are no professional team sports leagues. So there's some great golf events, great tennis events, great, I think, motorsports. There's other things that happen there. But as far as a league that's playing an ongoing schedule, that's kind of, kind of intriguing. So they're great people. These are discussions that aren't going to come to a conclusion overnight. But we're excited about the potential, and we'll see where it goes.
There's no decision yet as decided. No. Because, as we, media people, we write sometimes, it's going to be, the Final Four is going to be in Dubai. It's going to be this, and it's going to be that. When you read these articles, what do you think, by
Smile.
the way? Smile, we make you smile.
I mean, because some people just make things up, it's not, or they hear it from somewhere. It's fine. Listen, I get the media business. I'm glad that people are writing about us, even if it's always not accurate.
All right, that's great. And Turkish Airlines sponsorship, the continuation about this. What do you think, and how do you feel?
I haven't sat down with the people from TA yet, and looking forward to doing that. I wanted to do it on this trip and logistics, and it didn't get arranged. But I'm excited. Our team talks to, obviously, Turkish Airlines every day. I think it's been a great partnership as far as I understand it. I'm getting to know it. But, and I've flown Turkish Airlines a lot, and it's always really fantastic. They've been a really great partner. They've been a really loyal partner. They're one of our early bigger partnerships, so they're helping our growth. We have a lot of business in this country, and so we're super appreciative. And I think the deal runs for a whole nother year and a half or something, so I'm not sure it's urgent, but yes, I think there's going to be conversations soon.
I hope you like Turkish Airlines. That's our favorite one, Turkish Airlines.
Turkish Airlines.
Yes, and the IMG, obviously, for the last 4 years deal, and then are you thinking to continue with the agreement with IMG?
Well, the original term was, the initial term, I should say, is 10 years. There's extensions. I think it's 378 pages or something. So I've got to kind of reread it again and again it's not an easy thing to memorize. But we have a great partnership with IMG. We'll see where it goes into the future, but as far as I know, we've got, there's multiple years left on the initial term. So I haven't even thought about the long-term future with IMG. But EuroLeague Ventures, which is the joint venture with IMG, has grown quite significantly since we entered into that agreement in 2016. And so the business, when it comes to television, when it comes to digital, when it comes to social, and when it comes to audiovisual and partnerships, has grown quite dramatically since the beginning.
Yes.
So.
Well, I wanted to ask you that because we're watching the games throughout IMG's opportunities. That's why I would love to know. And I want to talk about, obviously, ELPA, the EuroLeague Players Association.
Yeah.
And since I watched this amazing interview, the chemistry between you and Kyle Hines, the president of ELPA, I really like it. And I heard that you're thoughtful about players. This is amazing to hear from a CEO. You're thinking about players all. You're not?
The players, I am. That's all I think about. Yes. The players are our core. That's the core, right?
Yes. What do you think about ELPA?
I mean, I had to tell one of our coaches, I won't say who, and I love our coaches. We have amazing coaches in Europe, but I had to tell one of them that nobody's paying to watch you coach. I mean, let's be, with all respect, right? To watch you jump up and down on the sidelines, that's not what people are paying to see. They're paying to see the players play basketball. The players are everything to me. And so I care about their well-being. I care that they're our partner. I want the players to understand this is a partnership. If we can grow this is good for the players. This is good for the coaches. This is good for the media. This is good for the fans. This is good for the people that work in our arenas and develop our arenas. We should grow the ecosystem. And I'm not only talking in terms of economics. I'm talking about everything. More grassroots programming, more community involvement. I think it's great. I mean, look, basketball is the #2 sport in the world.
Yes.
In certain European countries, it's the #2 sport. In a couple, it might be the #1 sport. We're just on the cusp, and we appeal specifically to the next generation. Lisa and I have a 22-year-old son. He's a basketball hoops junkie, I would say. He's really a hoops guy, even though he doesn't play. He never played basketball. He's a lousy basketball player, all right? He's a really good athlete, not a good basketball player. But he's into he follows the NBA, but he follows it differently. He does not sit in front of a television and watch a game for 2.5 hours. Almost never. Maybe if it's the finals or something like that. If he goes to a game in the arena, that's different. That's a different kind of experience. But he's socializing, he's seeing friends, he's taking into the game. There's a whole experience around attending live. But on television, what he is doing is he's looking at his phone off and on kind of all day, checking in about what's happening, whether it's NBA news, NBA scores, whether it's near live replays, meaning replays of something that happened 10 seconds ago, whether it's checking in on a game live on his phone and moving away from it, whether it's a highlight package, whether it's an interview like we're having now, whether it's a podcast with Kyle Hines, whether it's really cool content that people are creating in all kinds of different ways, whether it's the basketball equivalent of Drive to Survive, right? This is what 22-year-old people are into. And women too, men and women. In the NBA, much more equality of interest between men and women, by the way. Very important. And so they're consuming this differently. And it's very important that we, EuroLeague, adapt, because kids in Turkey and kids in the United States and kids in France and kids in Germany basically are consuming, the consumption patterns are very similar. They're not that dissimilar, and you know why. The phone.
The phone.
The phone, man. The phone is the great equalizer, right? The phone it's not that we're all the same, but we have this device in our pockets. It's either made by Google or Apple, pretty much, you know. I mean, a few others, but it's pretty much those two. And they're all consuming and they're all hungry for content. And so the big opportunity for us is appealing to that generation. It's not the same as when you grew up, you know, 20 years ago and your father says you have to support whatever football team, right, that they grew up with. It's different now.
Yes.
And I can tell you, at least through the research I do with my son, he follows players.
He follows players.
He follows players.
And their lives.
Yeah, and if players move from team A to team B, he follows the player.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean he doesn't have a favorite team. His favorite team is the Portland Trail Blazers, okay?
Right.
But his favorite players are all over the NBA. They're not necessarily one particular team. And that's not an easy thing for a lot of people over here to understand, because here people think, well, the club is the first thing, right? And they have a point. I understand historically, I think that's true, but I think we're going to see a shift in mentality as those Gen Zs and the alphas, you know, the 10-year-olds, right, become 20. And the 20-year-olds are going to become 30. And I think over that next 10 years, you can see a big shift.
Yes, and players are very important. And Jelko Obradović said, I think players should rest at least 2 months. What do you think about this?
Well, player health is real. I don't know that it's like there's some perfect formula. You know, I think it's different for different players. It depends a lot on playing time. So it's not all players. Some players don't get a lot of playing time and need more time on the court. Some players need less. I think it's also about physical conditioning and nutrition, and there's just so many factors that go into that. So I don't think you can make a blanket statement. What I do think is that we need to take care of our players. And I think there's ways that we need to invest more resources, whether it's travel conditions, ultimately, whether it's how we get players from point A to point B in a convenient way, whether it's the quality of food that they have access to. I think, you know, the medical side of things. We have a doctor inside the house at EuroLeague who's fantastic, and he and I have spent a little bit of time talking about what can be done to improve how we're dealing with our players from a medical and a rehab point of view. I think all these things matter a lot. So the reason I'm trying to grow the economy of EuroLeague is so we have more resources to work with so we can improve. It's not just about putting money in people's pockets, okay? It's about improving conditions for people and making this a more fulfilling, experience for everybody, for the players, for their families, for the coaches, their families, executives, everybody.
And then, as we mentioned, different cities in EuroLeague. It's one continent, but actually two continents, Asia and Europe, with Maccabi and Fenerbahce Beko. It's actually Asian side too. But so many cultures in Europe, in the basketball of EuroLeague. These cultural impacts on basketball, how do you see it?
Well, that's our best attribute, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I can imagine inside a club, you're on the team bus, you walk up the aisle of the team bus, and there's people speaking 6 different languages, but that also came from different places and different experiences. I walked in the first or second, I think the second week I came to the office back in September, maybe early October, and we have a player meeting every year at the EuroLeague office in Barcelona. And they said, hey, Marshall, there's a player meeting. You should come say hello. I didn't even know there was a player meeting, right? So I walk in and there's 18 players, one for every team. And I'm walking around the room and I'm shaking hands with people. And of course, the Americans kind of drew towards me, right? And I meet this guy named Nigel Williams Goss. Hi, I'm Marshal Glickman. He said, I know. I said, well, how do you know? How have you ever heard of me? I'm from Portland. Oh, you're from Portland. And he played, I said, where do you play high school? Because in the States, right, you play grade school, high school, college, pros. He said, I didn't play high school ball in Portland because I was so good as an 8th grader. How old are you when you're in 8th grade? Like
14.
14, right? Yes. So you're a kid. I was so good that I ended up going to an academy in Las Vegas. So I never played high school ball. But when I was growing up in Portland, you were with the Blazers, so I knew who you were. Okay, cool. So we talked about why he's here. And so because he had an NBA contract in front of him, he had a choice. He could have taken the NBA contract for a certain amount of money, which it's the worst NBA contract is pretty good money, right?
Yeah.
So he could have taken that. He told me he wouldn't have played that much. He knew that unless there was an injury in front of him, but he wasn't going to get a lot of playing time. The money's more or less the same. What he told me was the difference maker for him was the experience of being in Europe with his family. Bringing his family over here and having that experience and sharing it with them was the number one thing for him. And I thought, wow, that's really cool.
Wow.
I mean, same for me. I mean, I came over here in 2002 as a consultant to EuroLeague basketball, and my wife and I looked at each other and, it's like, what, living in Barcelona, Spain, what? I don't speak Spanish. What's that going to be like? And, we came over here and we're kind of nervous, and how are people going to be towards it, right? It's been so welcoming and so amazing. And so we've had this journey that started way back in 2002. We were here, we lived in Barcelona, we moved back to the States, now we're back again. But I've been traveling over here constantly since then. And it just changed our life, right? I have friends all over the world. I have friends in Russia, I have friends in Turkey, I have friends in Lithuania, I have friends in Israel, I have friends everywhere. It's great. That's the thing that, we appreciate. We're also foodies. So, culture means food in the way we look at things. And so we're kind of on a food tour constantly, a little here, a little there. It's great, which is, anyway.
Do you like Turkish food?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Do you have any favorite dish? Or dessert? Baklava?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So there's like, 200, 300 kinds. I didn't know they made so many varieties of baklava.
So chocolate one, the pistachio, walnut.
So yes, I love Turkish food.
So great to hear this. So I've been asking you so many questions, but is there any question that you would love to heard from a media person that you would love to give an answer?
Wow, she's good, man. That's really good. I've never been asked a question like what's your question? Is there a question? What is it that EuroLeague could do for you from a media perspective that would make your job, which would allow you to bring more interesting stories to your viewers?
For us, I think it's good I asked you that question, the cultural impacts on basketball. I think viewers all around the world should know more about Italy, more about Spain, more about Greece, more about Turkey, with the version, with the perspective of an American superstar or a Lithuanian center or Spanish guard. That would be amazing throughout our vision, throughout our cameras, our questions.
I think that's really cool. And I've been dreaming about the EuroLeague basketball version of Drive to Survive, to be honest with you. Because I see all these stories, and then when I heard Gus talk about his family thing, I'm thinking, God, that's something to share with people, that people would really be inspired, right, by that. And so, but I want to let the cameras in. I want to let them in. And so I need, kind of the coaches to relax on this, and we need more access and trust that it's not to embarrass anybody or to reveal some secrets. It's not about that. It's about sharing and enriching other people's lives and inspiring other people. And I think we could do more of that, and I want to see that happen. So
thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you for taking the time.
answers.
I'm really appreciative. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glickman.